If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
You are listening to Mindshock True Crime. This is the Johnny Gosch series. And this is episode 3, Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole. In typical Mindshock fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront. If you want to help support Mindshock, help us get more mind-shocking content out there with logic and reason, objectively examining cold cases, various true crime cases, missing persons cases, unsolved mysteries, the paranormal, and anything and everything in between. You can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, hit that bell for notifications so you can be notified when we drop the latest mind-shocking podcasts in a variety of cases and topics. Like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Alright, so let's get right to it. We do have to clarify quite a bit. There have been a lot of rabbit holes we've gone down in the previous 2 episodes, and there's plenty more. There's plenty more in what can only be described as a cesspool of madness, in this case, of just vile human beings exploiting and taking advantage of children, child trafficking, all of these lowest of the low criminal activity and depravity that can be imagined. And these people all need to be held accountable. The guilty parties need to be held accountable. For those that believe that there is zero involvement from law enforcement and government officials of all kind, I mean, the coincidence stack is so high to believe that it's very difficult. But hey, obviously everybody's entitled to their opinion, but if these people are guilty, I think every normal human being with a conscience would agree that they need to be held accountable. I mean, these are the lowest of the low when it comes to so-called human beings in this world. So, we're going to clarify quite a few things. On the Sword and Scale podcast, 2015, Noreen Gosch stated that Orville Cooney, the police chief, went to pedophile parties in Omaha. She actually stated, quote, one young boy who actually saw Johnny stuffed into a vehicle, end quote. So this most likely she's referring to P.J. Smith here. This is also from cavdef.org regarding these interviews, the notes on the interviews that we're going through right now. She also said that Cooney's successor was kinder, but the case had been so bungled by that point that the police still couldn't pursue it effectively, if they were even allowed to pursue it. She claims that they had a lab run by the NCMEC authenticate the photos that Noreen received as being of Johnny. Now, why is there no verification on the NCMEC side here? So, I mean, there could be a lot of reasons for that, but it's time to go on an aside. IowaColdCases.org. So, the Johnny Gosch write-up here from this website, featuring a couple details that we have not yet gone over. Case summary by Jody Ewing and Aaron Brilbeck. It's a story that shocked communities and catapulted Iowa into the national spotlight, changed state law, and forever changed the way parents monitor their children's activities. 12-year-old Des Moines Register paperboy Johnny Gosch left his West Des Moines home on Sunday morning, September 5th, 1982, to begin his paper route. He wore a white sweatshirt and Kim's Academy on the back, warm-up pants, blue rubber flip-flops, and carried a yellow paper bag. Normally his father, John Gosch, accompanied him on the route, but on this day Johnny went alone. He never came home. What happened after that has been the subject of speculation for more than 3 decades. In a November 11th, 2010 interview, the day before Johnny would have celebrated his 41st birthday, Johnny's mother, Noreen Gosch, told WHO-TV Channel 13's Aaron Brilbeck that several other paperboys, all witnesses to the abduction, said Johnny was approached by a man driving a blue Ford Fairmont. The guy shut off his engine, opened the passenger door, and swung his feet out on the curb where the boys were assembling their newspapers. And he started talking about "Where's 86th Street?" Miss Gosch told Brillbeck. Johnny turned to Mike and said, quote, "I've got my papers loaded in the wagon. I'm scared. I'm getting out of here. I'm gonna head home," end quote. So this is really weird. So was it just the demeanor of the driver? Like he opened the door as if he was trying to get him to get in the vehicle? Like the demeanor, the tone, because simply asking for directions, I mean, why would you open the door to ask for directions, though? That's kind of weird. Or did Johnny actually see that there were other people in the car? And they all looked shady, and he just got that intuitive feeling that this is just a bad situation with bad people. But continuing on here, as Johnny left, the driver of the car took off too, the boys told police. The man pulled the door shut and started up the engine. And why would he turn off the engine? I guess the engine was that loud that he wouldn't be heard. Okay, whatever. Started up the engine, but before he left, he reached up and flicked the dome light 3 times. Then he pulled out and left, Miss Gosch said. She said she believes the driver was signaling another person who later grabbed Johnny, and that one of the paperboys saw a tall man come out in between 2 houses and follow her son. West Des Moines Police Lieutenant Jeff Miller, a rookie cop at the time, told Brillbeck police began scouring the area immediately but hit one wall after another. They went ahead and called in the staff, Miller said. The troopers. They called in detectives, reserves, contacted Polk County Sheriffs, the State Patrol. At that point, they did a door-to-door canvass of that neighborhood, trying to find someone who saw something of Johnny. Nothing was found, and they saw nothing at all, said Miller. Noreen Gosch kept meticulous notes about her son's disappearance and documented the first 2 years in an early chapter. They have no crime, I have no son, the first 2 years. In a book she'd later publish about her unsuccessful efforts to work with police and what it took to finally get law enforcement's attention. Now, again, I don't know how many people actually think Noreen might have been involved in Johnny's disappearance. I mean, there's all kinds of people online. Obviously, I haven't seen any evidence of that. I don't know if anybody's presented any solid evidence of that. A lot of people like to say, oh, it's always the parents, whatever. And obviously, there's some strange information about Leonard John Gosch, Johnny Gosch's father, and what he may or may not have been involved in. But, yeah, as far as Noreen goes, and Noreen's stories never changed, unlike Leonard's, and regarding other individuals. So, would Noreen be keeping meticulous notes and trying this hard, risking her life, going through all these threats and death threats, if she was in on it in any way? It just doesn't seem likely. I just wanted to point that out just to be thorough, not that there's a lot of people saying that she was involved. Just, again, this is Mindshock, where we examine every single possible theory. But, yeah, I don't think anybody keeping meticulous notes like this that could be double-checked, unless someone wants to assert that she's keeping them, kind of trying to keep tabs on who knows what, where, how, in order to keep something covered up. But, again, would she push this hard and endure all these death threats and push back against police? Also, keep in mind the year here. This is the early 80s. I mean, there wasn't this level of police criticism at that time on the scale that there is post-internet, where, you know, you can find literally countless hours of police beating up old women and people in wheelchairs, etc., and shooting unarmed people. So the level, this kind of, that wasn't public information to the extent that it is now, or a lot of police corruption in the early 80s, it wasn't exposed to the degree it is now. It was barely exposed at all. So, yeah, all things to keep in mind. Let's continue here. A Mother's Crusade. 1 month after her son's disappearance, Noreen founded the Johnny Gosch Foundation and also developed a program called In Defense of Children. She began touring the nation, making nearly 1,000 personal appearances with law enforcement, missing persons organizations, those involving human trafficking, and doing whatever she could to increase overall awareness of crimes involving children. Again, if she was involved in some kind of ring, why would she do that? That would make the ring even more difficult to function with the more awareness of all these things. On July 1st, 1984, a bill she authored, the Johnny Gosch bill, was passed into Iowa law. It mandated immediate police involvement whenever a child went missing and was subsequently adopted by 8 additional states. And it's also kind of, you're living in a clown world where you actually need to have this passed into law. Like, a missing child, why would you not investigate that seriously immediately, especially under these kinds of circumstances? A boy does not leave his dog. I mean, that's well known. Okay, anyway. That same year, she traveled to Washington, D.C. and testified before Congress during hearings on organized crime. Her testimony, she said, led to death threats and also, in part, the eventual establishment of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. President Ronald Reagan invited her to the center's opening and dedication. She went on to work on 2 documentaries, one for HBO and another for the State Department. Her story and what she believed happened to her son led to her writing Why Can't Johnny Come Home?, a book published in 2000. Time marched onward, months turning into more years, still with no sign of her son. In the interim, 2 more young Des Moines boys also vanished under mysterious circumstances. 13-year-old paperboy Eugene Martin vanished from Des Moines' south side on August 12, 1984. Not quite 2 years after Martin's disappearance, 13-year-old Mark Allen told his mother he planned to walk to a friend's house down the street but never arrived at the neighbor's home and hasn't been seen since March 29, 1986. And I just have to make a comment on it because it is absolutely disgusting, vile, and evil what police told Mark Allen's mother, that we can't publicize his case and don't make a stink because we don't want people to be afraid. They totally swept this poor kid and his grieving family under the rug. I mean, this is criminal behavior by the police department. I mean, even if they're innocent of any kind of corruption and all that, the whole point is to serve and protect, not to sweep under the rug and deny justice by denying awareness. I mean, this is just unconscionable, and it needs to be stated because, I mean, even Eugene Martin's case relatively downplayed, again, compared to Gosch's anyway. But Mark Allen, just unconscionable. Even people familiar with Johnny Gosch's case, some of them don't know about Mark Allen. Some of them know about Eugene Martin, not even all of them. But Mark Allen just has been completely swept under the rug. Absolutely unacceptable on the part of law enforcement. There's also a write-up here on the milk carton kids. I'm not going to get into that because that's not quite specific to Gosch, but I would like to address, we're going to move on to the next point because this is something that coincidence theorists still write off, but we're going to get to the bottom of these photos that may or may not have contained Johnny Gosch. Still awaiting answers. Mark Allen's mother, Nancy Allen, has stated she doesn't know whether her son's disappearance is linked to the disappearance of either Johnny Gosch or Eugene Martin, but felt police were reluctant to pursue her son's case because of the other 2 missing boys. I got the distinct feeling police did not want parents to be frightened to let their children sell newspapers or do different things, Nancy Allen told WHO-TV's Aaron Brilbeck in a story Channel 13 aired November 25, 2010. More than 2 decades after all these boys disappeared, one mother received a stark reminder. Early one September morning in 2006, Noreen Gosch said a mysterious envelope showed up on her front doorstep. Inside, she said she found 3 disturbing photos of several boys all tied up. One of the boys appeared to be Johnny. I literally could not breathe. I could not get my breath, Gosch told Brilbeck. I was so totally unprepared to see something like that. All these years had gone by, and here was this picture. The image in question depicted a young boy hogtied and wearing only his underpants and socks. Gosch took the photos to the West Des Moines Police Department. When I did, we spread them out, and the detective kept saying, "That's Johnny, that's Johnny," and Gosch said, "I know that's Johnny." The press went wild. Newspapers and television stations across the country reported Gosch's story. Then came a call from West Des Moines police who told Gosch they were planning a press conference of their own. They planned to announce the pictures weren't of Johnny after all. I said, "That picture is Johnny," and the detective said to me, "Well, somebody from Florida called in and he said he used to be an investigator and remembered those pictures from a case in 1970-something," Gosch said. So they didn't even verify that this guy was actually police. It was just some guy who said he was a cop that worked on the case. I mean, wow, these West Des Moines police. Noreen Gosch said she asked the detective if the caller had provided them with any evidence. And he'd responded with, no, just telling her they just had the phone call. And based on his phone call, you're going to do a press conference and say that a picture's not Johnny, she recalled asking him. And he said, well, yes, I am. Now, again, is this a case of Keystone Cops, or is this a case of commands coming down from above? To this day, Gosch believes the boy in the photo is her son and that he was bound, gagged, and abused and taken for the purpose of satisfying pedophiles. Police continue to insist it's not him. We found out where the photos were taken, Lieutenant Miller told Brilbeck. We talked with investigators in Florida, and they were able to identify all of the kids in that picture, and they weren't Johnny Gosch. Now, that's an interesting summary by Lieutenant Miller, because according to other sources, they only identified 2 of the 3 boys, and not the third one, who is presumed to be Johnny. So, I mean, there's a little bit more information here, a lot of heartbreaking photo or image rendering of Johnny Gosch at age 41, and what his mother believed his life would have been like. So let's see if we can settle this issue regarding the photos, because I found something very interesting on the cavdef.org message board posted by Johnny's mom, Noreen Gosch herself, if this is her post. Wow, this is actually really interesting. Okay, so this isn't a thread. Was Johnny ever in Denver? And I'll get to the Denver issues in a moment. I know we're jumping around a lot, but I wanna get as much information out here as possible, because this is, of course, Mindshock, where we try to be as exhaustive and comprehensive as possible. So this is a post by Johnny's mom, December 17th, 2010. At the time, the West Des Moines police called me to tell me they were going to do a press release saying the photos were not Johnny. I warned them that they would look like a pile of monkey nuts within a few days because the photos are of Johnny. They proceeded with their press release despite the warning. Later, it was shown that their source, Nelson Zalva, had no evidence whatsoever, and they proceeded with their press release just based on a phone call from Zalva. No evidence. Can anyone believe that a police department can operate this way? I mean, from the way they handled this particular case from the outset, and Mark Allen? Yes. This particular police department seems highly compromised, corrupt, and or incompetent. I also had the photos authenticated by a photo lab, which the police decided they did not want to accept either. It was the National Center who authenticated the photos. It would be interesting to see if we could get them to verify that, but anyway, or do they not want that public for whatever reason? The photos, which were debunked by a Florida detective, Nelson Zalva, was a planned effort to throw the public in the opposite direction. Zalva realized his mistake and realized the photos were not part of his 79 investigation. He called the West Des Moines police and asked them to do another press release correcting the earlier misinformation. The police declined to correct the story. The Des Moines Register ran the story that Zalva had no evidence whatsoever to back up his story. We have had personal contact with Zalva, and this is the accurate account of what took place concerning his mistake, which was widely publicized. It served the purpose of the West Des Moines police to leave the impression with the public that the photos were not genuine. Okay, lot to unpack there. So was Zalva simply told to do this by a higher up, but he's supposedly retired? Or did he genuinely, if he's older and his memory's not great, did he genuinely just make an honest mistake and then he called to apologize and correct it? So, again, this is Johnny's mom. If this is really Noreen Gosch posting as Johnny's mom with the moniker Johnny's mom, she's claiming here in this post, or whoever the poster is, that Zalva has corrected this mistake. Furthermore, there's another interesting post from Gingerbread Man here. I just want to further lay to rest Zalva's claim that the photos were investigated in 1979. This was all discussed previously, but for those that are new, the picture contains a baseball banner and a World's Fair shirt that can be verified to have been produced in 1982. They clearly did not exist in 1979. Okay then. Another post here by Dorka the Just. Despite the fact that the information from Zalva has so clearly been debunked, it has long been a source of constant annoyance to me that many internet sites still cling to it as gospel. On the other hand, it only goes to show that people would pretty much believe what they want to. My observation, though, is that were I to have been Zalva, and had he my old job at the court, he would have been skinned alive and roasted over a proverbial barbecue pit for submitting a statement in a report that was unsupported by the record on appeal, which he clearly did in this instance. Unhappily, I did just that a few times while I was there and was deservedly trounced for having done. I'd also like to observe that I wish the America's Most Wanted website would at least frame this part of the equation to more properly fit the reality of the situation at hand, i.e., that while this detective from Florida claimed that the pictures were not of Johnny, but were of other boys who had participated in a sort of game back in 1979, 3 years before John's disappearance, these claims were not substantiated by any evidence, and that, in fact, had there been any evidence to justify this conclusion, he, Zalva, lost it. I suppose I could respect Zalva were he man enough to say, gee, I think I missed this one and shouldn't have shot off my mouth. I actually don't have any evidence to support my claim. That's something my father taught me to do when I was knee-high to an ant. Admit you made a mistake when you did, apologize, and go on. Sorry, just ranting. In any case, wherever he is, I do wish Johnny all the best. We could all use a lot more happiness these days. Okay. So here's the thing, too. I mentioned this all the way back in episode 1. The coincidence theorists, the authority-worshipping cultists who take as dogma whatever a so-called detective, retired or not, stated, it's weird. Because if he has no evidence, why would anybody believe the claim? I mean, even if it's true, maybe, like, let's say it could be true now that if this information about the baseball banner and the World's Fair t-shirt that was only manufactured in 1982... that removes any possibility of the photo being taken in 1979, not to mention if Noreen Gosch is saying it was lab tested and it was confirmed to have been taken in 1982 and not 1979. I mean, that's all pretty damning. Now, that still doesn't mean it's Johnny Gosch, but that throws the Zalva claim out the window that these photos were part of a 79 investigation. So the question is, what facilitated all of this? Now, I know we're jumping around, but I do want to get to this because this isn't a thread. Was Johnny ever in Denver? I'm looking at the summer of 1986, around July, August, around the Capitol Hill area. So, what's also curious, of course, the Denver restaurant where Johnny is alleged to have wrote Johnny Gosch was here with nail polish, in red nail polish. And this was confirmed, apparently, by not only Bonacci, but even a letter from another individual, Mike, corroborating this story. And this was before any of this was known. So, here is a post here by Trocaria. I used to live in Iowa, was born there. My youth straddled the two states of Iowa and Colorado. In September 82, my mom put me on a plane to Iowa to go see my dad, sending me off with the benediction of, at least I don't have to worry about anything bad happening to you there. 48 hours later, the world caved in on Johnny's family and changed the way folks in that part of the state saw themselves and other communities. A lot of doors got locked that night for the first time in years. And yeah, the impact of the Johnny Gosch case, especially locally in that area, cannot be understated. The reason I ask about Denver, not just Colorado as a whole, is I think I may have seen Johnny on an RTD bus in the summer of 1986. I had just come from an interview with the state of Colorado, got on the Zero bus or O bus that went up Colfax, a long hour ride into Aurora and through some very dicey parts of town. About 6 blocks from where I got on at the Capitol, a kid gets on. He looks out of it, maybe even a little off in the head. Then I look again. He had dark hair to the collar and in need of a shampoo. He had glasses, wore a striped t-shirt. Pimples. But something about his eyes, nose, and mouth made me suck in my breath. He looked like Johnny. Part of me wanted to get up right there and slip into the seat behind him, call his name and see if it rang a bell. But then I took in the dark hair, the glasses. Nah, Johnny was lighter, didn't wear specs. Besides, what's he doing all the way over here? If he was kidnapped into the juvie sex trade, wouldn't he be in New York City or LA? I'm guessing, so this was in 86, so this was before... Is this before the information about the red nail polish came forward? I kept an eye on him. He stayed on the bus about 8 or 10 blocks, then got off, walking towards the south. I was gobsmacked at what I had seen, and it had stuck with me all this time. Would Johnny have ever been let out on his own by that point? The part of town he got on and off at were not good, not at all. Indeed, as I would come to find out, a lot of young males plied the world's oldest profession in front of the Centennial Building near the state capitol where I worked. The more I have read, the more I find out. I could about kick myself for not following my gut and trying to make contact with the kid on the bus. If that was he, please forgive me. I pray that God has John in his keeping and that the day will come when he can at last come home. So, interesting information there. And furthermore, apparently, so this is something I found odd, because the friends of the Gosches were the ones who saw the Johnny Gosch was here in Denver. Apparently, it's been reported not just the friend, they were the Gosch's neighbors in Des Moines, and they just happened to see Johnny Gosch was here. I mean, I don't know what to make of that. We might have to do an episode examining the neighbors, because there are some people that think the neighbors might have been involved. But let's go all the way back to the Sword and Scale interview that we started with. Now that we have debunked Zalva, again, if the baseball banner and World's Fair t-shirt can be verified, and Zalva himself, I mean, if he really did contact Noreen and state his mistake, I mean, that's all. That would make that situation very clear. So the host, Mike, starts to get into the controversial issue of Noreen implicating her ex-husband. Noreen says that she never directly accused her husband of being involved in the case, and that she considers it an unanswered question stemming from Bonacci answering the judge's own question of how they knew Johnny would be alone by saying prior arrangements were made with Johnny's father. So, for the people that don't trust Ted Gunderson, because some people are stating that Ted Gunderson is compromised. Now, I don't know how much sense that could make. Again, I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue, but as posters have pointed out regarding Ted Gunderson, if he really is controlled op and some kind of a shill, that would mean that he was put out this info, true or not, in order to distract away from even more damning info. But it just doesn't really make a lot of sense, because Gunderson was one of these first guys that got the ball rolling into exposing these corrupt politicians, law enforcement, in satanic abuse and child trafficking. So either way, apparently, if this information's coming from Bonacci, verified by Gunderson, then Noreen is not really the source of this info regarding implicating Leonard, her husband Johnny's father, because this is Bonacci. So she goes on to say that she doesn't see why Bonacci would lie about that detail, but is unwilling to embrace his allegation until it is proven. So, again, if she really was just wanted to implicate her husband, she could make a lot stronger claims, but she clearly doesn't here. She's saying it's an unanswered question, and more proof is needed. I mean, that's a measured, level-headed response for the people who think that she went mad or whatever. She also states that Bonacci identified Michael Aquino as the colonel who paid for Johnny. She says she knows where the house in Sioux City, Iowa was and who owned it. Noreen refers to the court records of the Bonacci trial being sealed, and she says that in 2008, former Omaha Police Chief Robert Wadman tried to gain control of the sealed file so he could destroy it, leading her to enlist John DeCamp to stop it from happening. Noreen also states that Alicia Owen's child looks exactly like Robert Wadman, and he refused to take a DNA test. Noreen claims that Wadman started threatening her because her website hosted a report given to her by Ted Gunderson and mentioned public information from the Omaha World Herald about him. She also discusses being sued by Wadman, which was dropped after DeCamp beat him in court. And she says that Wadman left threatening messages on her home answering machine. So not only does she have issues with the Des Moines police chief, but also the Omaha police. I mean, this is corruption across the board. Noreen describes giving a personal message to Johnny on the Lisa Gibbons show, telling him how to find her just before his 1997 visit. So now here is a critical point, because I know a lot of people are on the fence about whether or not Johnny actually visited her. And myself included, I don't know what to make of it. I'm definitely not willing to call her a liar. I wasn't there. If that really was Johnny, or if it was another individual, not Johnny, pretending to be Johnny, yet he had all the same scars, that's a curiosity. Or if this was either imagined or made up by Noreen for whatever purpose. Again, I wasn't there. I don't know her. She hasn't been brain fingerprint scanned to my knowledge, but assuming, like, it seems like everything she's said has been either verified or not verified, but not debunked. So that's curious, because across this whole case, across all these decades, either certain things she said are unable to be verified because they're either in sealed files or have not been released, whatever. But a lot of things she said can be verified by third parties. That's very curious. So she's not lying about any of those things. They were verified. There doesn't seem to be a third category where what she stated has been proven to have been a made-up lie. That category doesn't exist unless if people want to point that out, that's fine. I haven't seen anything yet at my current level of research into this case when episode 3 yet. So I haven't seen that third category where it is proven that she lied or made something up. So some people say, why would he randomly visit her in 1997? So if she was on the Lisa Gibbons show specifically talking to him and how to find her, if he saw the show, that would be the time, right? So that actually makes it highly... See, I didn't know about this Lisa Gibbons interview. If she specifically told him how to visit her, how to reach her, because she wasn't at the house with Leonard. Leonard was living at the house at the time. And if Leonard was somehow involved or whatever, maybe Johnny didn't want to have anything to do with him or see him. But of course, if he would want to see his mother. So if his mother gave him specific instructions to come see her on the Lisa Gibbons show, a nationally televised show, he would know exactly where to go, how, and the fact that his mother wanted to see him at that time. That's a major, major piece of evidence that lends more credibility to this visit actually being true, because of this specific appeal and specific instructions on the Lisa Gibbons show. I haven't been able to find a copy of the show, so if anybody has this episode from 1997, but that's a piece of information that we cannot ignore here. Now, she did get upset at being questioned about the visit, and she threatens to hang up. That could be for a bunch of different reasons. Clearly it's very emotional, and she probably doesn't like being called a liar. If she's telling the truth, and this is very emotional, of course. It seems like if she would be lying, it wouldn't really affect her that much, to the point where, if she's lying about everything all the time, and the visit, it's like, why would she? I don't know. It just seems more likely that it is true, or at least she believes it's true. She says that Johnny related how the pedophile operation, such as safe houses, worked, and named names. After which she went to the county attorney and gave him all the information, crediting it to an informant. Noreen claims that the county attorney, John Sarcone, has had her back ever since and knows the information is accurate. Says she was recently invited to an early morning law enforcement conference where someone recognized her as the one who forced the FBI to change how it investigated missing children's cases. David Bellinson says that elements which couldn't be verified beyond the surface level allegations were left out. Bellinson gives his standard Q&A about belief in Noreen's account. Was Johnny abducted? If so, was it organized? If so, who it was? What else they did? He made clear he believes that there was an organized conspiracy to abduct Johnny, but is unable to say how far beyond that it goes. So not a single abductor. All right, so we have even more potential information that could prove Noreen's account that Johnny visited her. Because if this county attorney got information that could only be given by Johnny Gosch or someone directly involved, and was able to verify it, and this was right after the alleged visit, I mean, that's quite conclusive. That's quite conclusive. Now, I'm just going to do a quick aside here on Sarcone, because Sarcone stated to the Des Moines Register in 1999. All right, so here's an article here by Frank Santiago, Des Moines Register. Noreen Gosch stated, "I saw Johnny. Mother of missing carrier didn't tell police because she feared for son's life." February 7th, 1999. Noreen Gosch said Saturday that her missing son Johnny visited her at her West Des Moines apartment in 1997. She said she never told authorities because Johnny said it would put their lives in danger. "I had no warning," she said. "He just showed up." She said she didn't call police right away because her son, who would have been 27 years old at the time, arrived with another man and she thought others might be outside in the car. She said Johnny told her not to disclose that he was alive, and I haven't done so because it was in his best interests. Gosch said she immediately recognized the long-haired visitor who knocked on her door at about 2:30 a.m. in March 97. He opened his shirt to show a birthmark on his chest. "We talked about an hour and a half. He was with another man, but I have no idea who the person was. Johnny would look over to the other person for approval to speak." West Des Moines police said the case remains under investigation and would not comment further. Polk County Attorney John Sarcone said he is happy for Noreen Gosch if her son is alive, but he said he thinks Johnny Gosch would be safer coming to police than trying to hide. That's an interesting statement there. So, does he have information that he is alive? The reported visit was yet another odd twist in the bizarre disappearance of newspaper carrier Johnny Gosch, who was 12 years old when he vanished without a trace September 5th, 1982 in West Des Moines. His wagon was found about 2 blocks from his home, filled with copies of the Des Moines Sunday Register he was to deliver. On August 12, 1984, Eugene Martin, 13, who was also delivering the Des Moines Sunday Register, vanished from a South Des Moines neighborhood, also without a trace. Dozens of people as far away as Africa and Canada have claimed to see the boys, individually or together. Police have been skeptical and haven't established a motive. But Noreen Gosch has insisted her son was taken by a ring of international pornographers who abuse children. Although investigators say they've been unable to link the abductions, there is a suspicion that they are connected because of the boys' ages, the fact that the incidents happened on early Sunday morning, and because both victims were carriers. Noreen Gosch disclosed the early morning meeting with her son while under oath in federal court. So she didn't just state this to the media. This was under oath. She made this statement under oath in Lincoln, Nebraska, during a hearing on a civil lawsuit. The suit was brought by Paul A. Bonacci against Larry King, a manager of the defunct Franklin Credit Union, who Bonacci said sexually abused him. Bonacci said he took part in Johnny Gosch's abduction, but Sarcone said investigators concluded any involvement by Bonacci was not credible. And I'll get back to that in a statement. In a second. Let me just finish the article. Noreen Gosch said she doesn't know the whereabouts of her son. He didn't say where he's living or where he was going. She said she did not tell her former husband, John Gosch, of the meeting. Leonard John Gosch, could not be reached for comment Saturday. Okay, so let's go back to So Noreen said that Sarcone, she gave information to Sarcone that made him believe that it was Johnny who visited her. Or at least that the information she gave him from she didn't tell him it was Johnny originally. She said it was from an informant. But supposedly Sarcone verified it. Now, Sarcone is also stating that involvement by Bonacci is not credible. Is he just saying that as a threat? Because if him and Noreen have a trusted relationship and he's really trying to help Noreen, would he just say that in order for people not to target Bonacci? Because again, if he's a good guy here, so there's some interesting points here further too. Because for those that say that Bonacci just made all this up, he did win his case. So here's an excerpt here From the Associated Press, January 13th, 2000. King drops appeal of $1 million judgment. On February 5th, 1999, in U.S. District Court in Lincoln, Nebraska, an extraordinary hearing occurred in Paul A. Bonacci versus Lawrence E. King, a civil action in which the plaintiff charged that he had been ritualistically abused by the defendant as part of a nationwide pedophile ring linked to powerful political figures in Washington and to elements of the U.S. military and intelligence establishment. 3 weeks later, February 27th, Judge Warren K. Urborm ordered King, who is currently in federal prison, to pay $1 million in damages to Bonacci, in which Bonacci's attorney, John DeCamp, said was a clear sign that the evidence presented was credible. So to all the coincidence theorists and authority-worshipping cultists out there who allege that there is no such rings or politicians' involvement and military involvement in all of this, how did Bonacci win a $1 million judgment? I mean, this isn't a settlement. This was a judgment for damages ordered by the judge. This is not a settlement to prevent Bonacci from further speaking on the matter. This is a judgment for $1 million in damages. I would like to hear the coincidence theorists' thoughts on this. I mean, what do they think? Because, I mean, to be able to prove it in a court of law beyond reasonable doubt. And again, these files supposedly are sealed, so we don't know the exact evidence presented, but I mean, they don't just hand out $1 million to people who say they've been abused without evidence. And of course, the kibosh was put on the Conspiracy of Silence documentary. We went over that as well. So how credible is Bonacci if he's able to present enough evidence to win a $1 million judgment? And why would King drop the appeal if the evidence wasn't legitimate? I mean, if the evidence wasn't legitimate, because if it's just all hearsay, of course you appeal. There's no evidence, guilty or innocent, he would appeal. But if there's no chance of winning the appeal, I guess he didn't want to go through the fees, because if the evidence presented was that damning, I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. But yeah, so what does everybody make of this visit by Johnny? Now that we have further information here. So she actually appealed on the Lisa Gibbons show nationally, publicly, for him to come visit her, and then he actually does. This story also and supposedly Sarcone can verify the information that Johnny or another individual who's not Johnny gave her. Because even if the information's all credible, technically that doesn't mean it was Johnny. That just means it was someone who knew information about these criminals. So this information also matches Jimmy Gibson's account, though, shady as he might be. If Johnny Gosch is going to, like, Native American reservations, he would grow his hair out long, try to blend in, etc. That kind of matches. So, yeah, and then if he really got Noreen to believe their lives are all in danger, or at least his is, because she didn't even go to the police with this. She testified under oath of this a few years later. So, some more information here. This is the FAW cast interview, September 2016. Noreen mentions the night before Johnny asked to do his paper route by himself because all the other boys were, and Noreen rejected it, saying that the other boys were older than him. He went out alone anyway. Says a blue over blue car pulled up. A man shouted through the window that he was asking for directions. But Johnny kept walking to the paper drop at the corner. The blue car made a U-turn in the street and pulled back up to where the kids were sitting folding their papers. I went over some of these details before, so apparently he made 2 attempts to get directions from Johnny Gosch, even making a U-turn to do so. That's kind of creepy. I mean, that's enough to freak somebody out, because if it was just the one pull-up, okay, open the door, ask, whatever. If it's the second time and Johnny Gosch is getting a really bad feeling here. So check this account out. So in this FAWcast interview, so Noreen is stating the car made a U-turn, pulled back up to where the kids were sitting folding their papers. Then the man got out through the passenger door. So not just opened. In this interview, she's stating he got out of the car, through the passenger door, and started asking questions using garbled words as if he was under the influence or had a speech impediment. Says that as Johnny walked away, creeped out by the man got back in his car, slammed the door, started the engine, and flicked the dome light 3 times before speeding away. Wow. Okay, a lot more details here. So Johnny's freaked out by this guy, maybe because he's seems insane, and if he can't speak properly. And then the man got back into his car and slammed the door as if angry? Okay, she says as soon as that happened, a tall, thin man, estimated about 6'5", and again, to kids, someone who's tall, 6'2", 6'3", might look 6'5", whatever. Again, we don't know that. Came out from between 2 houses and followed. Also, if people that are like really skinny and lanky, they look taller than they actually are due to their disproportionate frame. 2 houses, followed Johnny quite stealthily. What does that mean? Does that mean he was like ducking low by bushes? Says that the blue car had gone full circle, came back up on a side street where it parked. Noreen claims that as Johnny turned, the back door opened, someone got out. The man following Johnny shot him with something that made him drop to the ground. Then they both loaded Johnny into the car before they slammed the car door and ran the stop sign heading north on 42nd Street. According to Noreen, a boy in his bedroom, PJ Smith, is the one who heard a scuffle, looked out the window, and saw Johnny being shot with the stun gun, allegedly, then loaded into the car. Noreen claims to have had written witness statements from all the people on the street written down before the police arrived. She says the police did go to interview all the witnesses, but didn't bother to bring any writing implements, which baffled the parents of the witnesses and caused them to call Noreen. Okay. Hold on a second. I mean, we're going really far into Mindshock land. So the police aren't even taking notes, and the parents of the witnesses found this so strange because I guess they knew Noreen, this is the same neighborhood. They called her to tell her how strange that was. Now, also, the people who think Noreen makes stuff up, they would presumably, these other people could verify all this information. I mean, this is just straight up Mindshock. I mean, it gets even worse because the police chief himself said that there's no evidence of a crime when he knew full well that PJ Smith said that he saw Johnny being shot by something and physically abducted into a vehicle. Noreen states that the police chief got very angry at her for wanting a private investigator. Oh, that's telling. Noreen says that the kids who saw the blue car were then taken to a dealership to pick out the color of the paint chips, which changed color under mercury vapor light. She claims that Chief Cooney also made statements to the news that Johnny was just a runaway. Noreen recalls being at a press conference with parents of missing children who were mistreated by police, and the RCMP were there speaking about how in a short time they'd be able to uplink a child's information throughout the world in a matter of seconds on the information superhighway. Does anybody still call the internet that? Noreen says on a daily basis she worked with private investigators who canvassed a radius surrounding her home and performed door-to-door interviews. She refers to one man who was extremely grateful to have been approached by the investigators, saying that he had tried unsuccessfully to tell police what he saw. He got up early to get a drink, heard a motor running, and looked out the window where he noticed a van parked against the flow of traffic, and after watching the van for a while, a blue over blue car pulled up, something long was unloaded from the back seat, and it was put in the van before both cars headed back north towards the interstate. She says that when the detective came back to her with the report, he told her to bury it and never give it to police. Noreen says that members of the finance committee pulled her aside and said that the Johnny Gosch law wouldn't be enforced. What? That's messed up. She claims that at the July 1984 signing, another legislator next to her said the bill was only to humor her, as there would never be another kidnapping, and that the foundation subsequently began... I mean, even if that's true, why would you tell her that? Like, what is wrong with these people? That the foundation subsequently began a letter-writing campaign against the legislator with his quote. Noreen says that earlier in the summer of '84, she was contacted by a man who said she had information about the case and wanted to meet. And this is kind of ironic, too, because this other individual who's stating that there wouldn't be a kidnapping, and then here we go here, he told her, she's talking about Sam Soda here, he told her at the meeting that there would be a second paperboy kidnapping in Des Moines on the south side in the second weekend in August. I mean, this is very specific information. The second weekend in August, and he wanted her to go to the police with information, but balked at her willingness to tell them his name. Noreen says the Des Moines police wouldn't let her talk to a detective. So she walked in and the people at the desk wouldn't even let her talk to the detective. What? She told the news director at local TV stations as well as one reporter at the Des Moines Register. Editor's note, Frank Santiago. Noreen says she arrived home from a hearing in D.C. and ABC 2020 arrived the next day doing a follow-up story of Johnny Gosch. Claims that after the filming, she told the producer about the forewarning of the kidnapping the next day, Sunday, prompting the producer to stay in Des Moines. Okay, so if this can all be verified, so she's telling, wow, this is crazy. Because some people are alleging she made up this whole story about the Sam Soda's warning of a second kidnapping. Noreen claims that early the next morning, a TV reporter called out of breath, stating that there had been another kidnapping exactly like she said, which he heard because the news director shared it to make fun of Noreen. What is wrong with these people? Noreen says Johnny was photographed 2 weeks before the kidnapping, as witnessed by a neighbor. Now, also, I have to interject here. Which neighbor? The same neighbor who saw that Johnny Gosch was here writing in the Denver Mexican restaurant in red nail polish? I would like to know that information. Noreen says that she knows for certain that after his abduction, Johnny was transported to a house, kept there for about 2 weeks, and photographed so that pictures could be advertised to pedophile buyers, one of whom arrived and counted out money on the table to purchase Johnny. Wow. Noreen says that in 1985, a prisoner in Des Moines sent a letter claiming that there was a ring operating in northwest Iowa, all of whom were using children from some kind of list. She says she checked out the lead on her own, getting all the information which she gave to Governor Branstad, leading to a ring in the Fort Dodge area getting busted. Go Noreen. Noreen claims that after Bonacci confessed to his attorney hired a private investigator to vet what Bonacci said, and everything checked out. She says that after the PI did his work, he contacted the family and brought tapes of the interviews, says he wanted her to do a meeting with Bonacci in person, and she called the WHO to document it. Noreen describes fainting upon seeing Bonacci in person for the first time. She says the PI asked Bonacci, "Do you know who this lady is?" He said no. The investigator told him it was Johnny's mom, leading Bonacci to burst into tears and apologize profusely before he gave a detailed account of the kidnapping. So this, apparently, if he's acting, his acting was good enough to convince Noreen. His acting was good enough to convince a judge to give him $1 million settlement for the abuse he suffered. His acting was good enough to convince former FBI head Ted Gunderson and other private investigators. I mean, so what does this mean? Either this guy's like the greatest actor of all time, or he's legit. Noreen points out how Bonacci said in the prison interview, and apparently this is there is a video of this, that they drove a few blocks to where a van whose color and direction told by Bonacci matched that of the buried witness account. So imagine you're Noreen here, so you spoke to neighbors. Now all of a sudden this guy in prison is giving all this unreleased information about Johnny, his personality quirks, all of these things that were never released publicly, and also this account that nobody knows except her and whatever police. Actually, did the police even take this guy's account? So the color and direction told by Bonacci matched that of the buried witness account. So about this parked van. Noreen recalls how in response to the PI wanting to set up a prison meeting with Bonacci, she said she needed some time to be able to face Bonacci without being angry. She references that all the safe houses used to keep children, some of which Bonacci revealed, they tended to be in the middle of nowhere. Noreen claims that the Colorado ranch was burned down after America's Most Wanted aired. So this is the house supposedly owned by the prison guard that couldn't be tracked down. So she's stating that after it was aired on America's Most Wanted, it mysteriously burned down. That's kind of damning. An interesting comment here regarding, I don't even know where this was from, but apparently, yeah, people cannot find anything out about this supposed prison guard who owned this house that Bonacci pointed out in Colorado. One huge crucial question that needs answering is, who is the prison guard that supposedly owned the ranch that Paul Bonacci takes America's Most Wanted to visit in Colorado? The ranch has an underground area where they supposedly kept children. There was also initials carved into the wood. They mention it was owned by a prison guard. I have yet to find out anything regarding who this person may or may not be. Why wouldn't he be a person of interest? Why not a huge search? Then, as always, we see cases like this which may involve powerful people like politicians, military like Michael Aquino. What happens after the airing? The ranch burns down? Yeah, that isn't suspicious at all. And did America's Most Wanted have time to do DNA testing on that building? Because, I mean, come on, in that basement, if children really were kept there, I mean, would they find many, many different samples of DNA, and who would they match? How many missing children would they match if this is true, if Paul Bonacci's account is true here? I mean, obviously, Paul Bonacci's other accounts were enough to win him a $1 million settlement, so clearly there was evidence there. So would he make up some information and not other information? Like, what are those that criticize Bonacci think about all of this? But this house was burned down. Curious. Continuing on here regarding the FAW cast interview here. So Bonacci mentioned how the kids were taken to a Mexican restaurant in Colorado. One of the kids had a bottle of red nail polish, which they used to write a message, something that friends of the Gosch family later saw on their trip to the restaurant. Again, were these just friends or were these the actual neighbors? And were these neighbors the same people who reported the woman taking pictures of Johnny Gosch 2 weeks prior? And who knows what else? Noreen recounts how Bonacci said that after the kidnapping, they took Johnny to a house outside of Sioux City, ran by a man named Charlie, and sketched a detailed picture of the man, which the private investigator for Bonacci's attorney took to the county attorney, who searched through all the county's mugshots to find the man. She claims Charlie had a lengthy rap sheet for sexual offenses. She also says Orville Cooney resigned on a Monday morning due to stress, which was actually her threat to sue the city. Noreen mentions how in the 1980s it was very prevalent for kids to be photographed and targeted for abduction. She describes the neighbor witnessing photos being taken of Johnny by a man using a telephoto lens in a car with California plates. You know what's weird though, in other accounts it states woman. Like, was it a man and a woman? Was there a woman in the car and the man was the one taking the photos? Were they both? I mean, I don't know. She also states that one particular man had a vehicle that was at the kidnapping site, editor's note Sam Soda, brought photos of Johnny to the motel the night before and said he was the kid they were taking the next morning. She recounts how many years later, NCMEC President Robert Lowery revealed to her that there was a third kidnapping in Des Moines in 1986, which she had never heard before, and told Jan Michelson she claims the police told Mark Allen's mother back in 86 not to go to the press or Noreen Gosch and broke the Johnny Gosch law. And this is corroborated by Mark Allen's mother, which we just went over this article either. I mean, every step of the way, Noreen's account gets corroborated by third parties. Obviously not every piece of information, because some of them have not been corroborated yet, but they haven't been disproven either. So it's just weird, like years and years go by and she gets vindicated more and more and more. Will she eventually be vindicated of every single claim she's made? I mean, that's the way it's going so far. Noreen says the March 97 visitor, when knocking, said, "It's me, Mom. It's Johnny." She wanted Johnny to stay and tell his story to help get the perpetrators to justice. Noreen says the attorney in the 1999 trial asked her if she'd ever seen or talked to Johnny again, and she remained silent, but the judge instructed her to answer, and she testified she had seen him once. So, okay, all right, I'm gonna have to say here, she seems completely honest to me, because she didn't even wanna. It seems like she's honest to a fault. She's under oath. The judge is instructing her to answer, and she remains silent. So she does not wish to lie or reveal the information, but the judge persists, and she admits, basically, if this is true, she admits that she's seen him once. It's like she can't lie. So it's almost like she did not want to reveal this information, and the judge forced her, and she took her oath seriously in that courtroom. I mean, I really do not understand the Noreen Gosch detractors. It seems like they're just trying to soothe their own cognitive dissonance by trying to paint her as crazy or insane. Almost every claim she's made has turned out to be corroborated by third parties. So at this point, I think I'm going to have to say it was either Johnny or it was someone who was able to trick her enough to think that he was Johnny. I mean, you could also say it could have possibly been a hallucination, but I mean, why then? I mean, right after the Lisa Gibbons show when she pleads for him to come and gives him direction. I mean, I don't know. The Mindshock listeners can chime in with their opinions here. According to her, a reporter from the Associated Press was sitting there, wrote everything down. She says she learned a lot more about how the trafficking network operated at the trial. Noreen insists around the time mentioning the Wetterling case, there's no evidence Johnny is dead, and her investigators have received reports of him living under another identity. Interesting. So her private detectives stated that he's living under another identity, so maybe she knows where he is the whole time? So why Johnny can't come home? Not that she doesn't know where he is, but why he can't come home. I mean, that's curious. That's a good title, Why Johnny Can't Come Home. She suggests those who want the book get in touch with her by writing to the Johnny Gosch Foundation at AOL.com. Again, this is an old interview. I don't know if that email is still valid. So, wow. All I can say is, wow, this is some mind-shocking information. Furthermore, I would like to go over... For those that say that there's no evidence of a ring or conspiracies or anything of the sort, I mean, there's been a multitude of people arrested for trafficking children in these pedophile rings. Like, the coincidence theorist goofs here really don't have a leg to stand on when they're trying to deny any possibility of a ring being involved here. So, this is Des Moines Register, March 15th, 1986. Man named in pedophile network case pleads guilty. By Ann Carruthers K. A Des Moines man who hired teenagers for the state fair and worked for 2 years at Merle Hay Mall's Chatsworth the Talking Reindeer pleaded. I mean, a lot of these people are just attracted to these events where there's teenagers and children. It's weird. Pleaded guilty Friday to 3 counts of sexually abusing teenage boys. Jerry Wintz, 47, one of 5 Des Moines men accused of acting as a pedophile network that passed boys around for sexual purposes, accepted a plea bargain less than a week before he was to go to trial on 6 counts of sexual abuse. Wintz is the 4th man in the group to come to court. One of the men, Larry Hoffman, was declared mentally incompetent to stand trial. Former Des Moines elementary teacher Stephen Woodcock was convicted of 2 felony sex abuse charges. Another former teacher, David Graham, pled guilty to a reduced charge of conspiracy to commit lascivious acts with a child. A 5th man, Patrick Baird, an insurance company clerk, is awaiting trial on 4 felony sex abuse charges. Wintz's guilty plea was taken by Polk County District Judge Jack Levin in an empty courtroom after court hours Friday. Are you pleading guilty because you are in fact guilty? Levin asked Wintz. Yes, sir, I am, replied Wintz in firm voice. He told the judge that he considers himself an intelligent man except for these acts. Mr. Wintz is going to prison, said prosecutor Gregory Byler, noting that each of the 3 convictions carries a mandatory 10-year term. However, Byler said that as part of the plea bargain, he will not make a recommendation on whether Levin should allow Wintz to serve the sentences together or insist that they be served consecutively. Byler said he will give Levin the facts of the 3 crimes as well as Mr. Wintz's prior history. He is to be sentenced May 27. Byler said Wintz, he met 2 of the boys through the state fair and a 3rd boy through the boy's father, who at one time worked for Wintz, a tax preparer. The boys were 14 and 15 years old at the time of the sexual abuse occurred. Wintz told Levin that he believed one of the boys was 18 because the boy had lied about his age in an application for a job at the Iowa State Fair. So he believed one of them was 18, but not the other. No evidence of drugs. Byler said statements from the boys indicated that Wintz befriended the boys and then seduced them. He said there was no evidence that Wintz provided alcohol or drugs, and Wintz said he used neither himself. Wintz worked for Job Service of Iowa, hiring temporary help for the fair. He also worked at Chatsworth the Talking Reindeer in 1982 and 1983, Byler said. Chatsworth was a popular Christmas feature for preschool children. As Chatsworth, Wintz sat in a mock gingerbread house in the mall and talked to children through a microphone which amplified his voice through a reindeer head. After the hearing, Wintz denied allegations that he was involved in a local witches' coven, allegedly led by Graham. The allegation was made in a sworn statement by a woman who said she had been a longtime friend of Graham. I don't think the coven had anything to do with the sexual bonds, said Byler. So what? Wintz also denied the prosecution's contention that 5 men introduced their alleged victims to each other. He admitted he knew all the men, but said he hadn't seen any of them except Baird in several years. What? So he admits he knows all of them, but denied that they were involved in these crimes together in any way. Wow, that's weird. But yeah, no, just for all the coincidence theorists and those who who vehemently deny with religious fervor any possibility of a ring or anybody exploiting children in the West Des Moines area. I mean, there's so much precedent here. I mean, it's scary stuff. I mean, I don't know how many people have researched this in other areas, but is this just more prevalent in Des Moines in this during this time period? And West Des Moines isn't even that populated. I'm looking at the census figure from publications.iowa.gov right now. In 1980, the population of West Des Moines was 21,894. In 1990, it was 31,702. So we're not talking big numbers here. I mean, this must be disproportionate abuse of young boys because, I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. It's not like some huge city. Like, it's just weird. So that was West Des Moines. Des Moines itself, 190,000. So quite larger, but still not as big as many other cities. But most of this activity specifically in West Des Moines. I mean, this is mind-shocking stuff. Let's go over a couple more issues. This is from the Web Sleuth thread on Johnny Gosch. From February 2020, just a couple more points I want to go over here for the coincidence theorists. So, the Des Moines Register was ignoring any kind of helpful publicity. No one could understand why, because Johnny worked for them. So we worked with other forms of the press in and outside of our state. I received a phone call in the spring of 1983, so this is Noreen Gosch's testimony here. In the spring of 83, a woman saying she worked for the Des Moines Register in the newsroom. She reported, quote, shortly after the kidnapping, the editor at the time came into the newsroom and announced, all articles written about the Gosch boy will be slanted against the family and for the police. She would not give me her name. She was afraid of losing her job. I now knew what was happening, but I didn't understand why. So clearly, is this orders from above, or were the Des Moines Register protecting their own individuals who were involved in the rings specifically, or were they just following orders from above? Because if this goes all the way to the White House, Noreen Gosch also stated here, Des Moines Register, September 22nd, 1989. Noreen Gosch stated, Paul Bonacci, who participated in the kidnapping of Johnny, also stated he was repeatedly sent to Washington, D.C. to have sex with Massachusetts Representative Barney Frank. The Washington Times published a front-page story stating a child prostitution ring was being run out of his D.C. apartment. I mean, what do all the coincidence theorists make of this? I mean, there's just so much evidence here, and published in major newspapers too. We're not talking about GeoCities blogs or like Reddit, or we're talking about evidence produced to major newspaper. I mean, this is, and in the court of law, Bonacci's winning $1 million settlements. Check this out. This was New York Times, August 26, 1989. Representative Frank acknowledges hiring male prostitute as personal aid. Representative Barney Frank of Massachusetts said today that without his knowledge, a male prostitute he had hired to do personal errands had run a prostitution service from the congressman's Washington apartment. Wait a second. So he acknowledges hiring the male prostitute as a personal aid. He just simply didn't know that this male prostitute personal aid was also running a prostitution service directly from his own apartment, from the congressman's apartment. Mr. Frank, who made his homosexuality public in May 87, said he paid for sex with a prostitute one time in the spring of 85 and then hired him as a personal employee later that year because he thought he could encourage the man to change his life. Anybody buying that? Thinking I was going to be Henry Higgins and trying to turn him into Pygmalion was the biggest mistake I've made, Mr. Frank said at a news conference in Newton, a Boston suburb that is part of the state's 4th congressional district. Mr. Frank, a 49-year-old Democrat, has represented the district since 81. A very good con man. Conceding poor judgment, Mr. Frank said, it turns out that I was being suckered. He was, among other things, a very good con man. Better than a politician? Mr. Frank's remarks followed publication of an article today in Washington Times that disclosed the congressman's link to a prostitute, the man's use of the Capitol Hill apartment for a prostitution service. The newspaper called the man by what it said was a professional name. Mr. Frank said today his name was Stephen Goby. Washington police records show that Mr. Goby has a history of offenses, including drug charges. The congressman said that to help Mr. Goby, he hired him as a housekeeper and driver. Mr. Frank also said he made some calls and wrote letters using congressional stationery to Mr. Goby's probation officer in Virginia to let him know the office he was employed. Proof of employment is usually a condition of probation. Knowledge is denied. In the Washington Times article, the man was quoted as saying Mr. Franklin knew of the use of his apartment for prostitution. At his news conference, Mr. Frank denied having such knowledge. And of course, he would deny it even if he had it, right? Efforts by New York Times to reach Mr. Goby at various listed addresses today were unsuccessful, but in an interview in Washington television station WUSA this evening, Mr. Goby told of bringing clients to the congressman's apartment, and he acknowledged that he had been convicted on felony sex and drug charges in Virginia. Mr. Frank said he dismissed Mr. Goby in August 87 after his landlords had told him for the second time about people coming and going from the apartment while he was away. The congressman said that he had paid Mr. Goby with his own money for the personal errands, and that government or campaign money was not involved. Mr. Frank acknowledged that, well, if he accepted that government or campaign money, then it's going into his personal account, then it's going to Goby. It's still derived from extorted funds or donated funds specifically to his campaign. Mr. Frank acknowledges that he broke the law by patronizing a prostitute, but said he had not violated any ethics or congressional rules. The congressman said the disclosure would not diminish his influence in Congress, where he is known for sharp wit and skillful floor debate, and where he is considered a leading voice of liberalism. Mr. Frank said the voters of his district would not judge him on the basis of indiscretions in his private life. Well, if he's hiring him to be his aide, I mean, that's kind of professional. On the other hand, Mr. Frank said the incident is likely to be used against him in a campaign. If I was planning strategy, this is not one of the events I would propose, he said. Okay, let me skip along here. Mr. Frank said that the episode became public because Mr. Goby decided to get some revenge by telling his story to the Washington Times. Mr. Gobi has a history of run-ins with the local police. Court records in Washington show that he was placed on 4 years probation in 1975 when he was 18 years old for selling and possessing narcotics. The Washington Times reported that he was convicted in Virginia in 82 on 2 obscenity charges, 1 sodomy charge, and a single charge of cocaine possession. He was on probation for those crimes at the time Mr. Frank hired him, the paper said. After he left Mr. Frank's employment in early 88, Mr. Gobi was twice arrested by the police in Washington and charged with burglary and shoplifting food from a supermarket. He was not prosecuted on the first charge. Okay. Some more posts here regarding the ranch that Bonacci said they were taken to. So apparently this was near Elephant Rock, Colorado, near Aurora, just north of the Springs. Buena Vista is going by the roads from there, south on I-25, then back up northwest by county roads. Newer built home in that region. I won't say the address, and the address has also been changed since the 90s, which is interesting. What? So they actually changed the lot's address after this aired? What? Mountains in background matches up to the footage from the background of Paul on the ranch in Who Took Johnny and also America's Most Wanted. It's also interesting how many names have changed with the deeds. Military man name comes up. So this is a poster, Johnny Chicago, on Web Sleuth stating this information. So apparently he has the address, and the address actually changed. How often is that done where they actually change the name of the lot, the name, number, whatever? And apparently military man, does that mean Aquino? Is that him? Or is it another military man? Also, further posts from Johnny Chicago here. So supposedly in this area around Sedalia, there is some kind of a cult, Brotherhood of the White Temple. This area around Sedalia is very strange. There is a huge cult compound there near Sedalia called the Brotherhood of the White Robe. They publish occult literature out there and have been since the 1930s and have hundreds of members. Also an eccentric woman named Tweet Kimball, yes, that's her real name, who married an OSS CIA man after World War II, brought a huge section of land near Sedalia with her husband, and built a recreation of a Scottish Masonic castle overlooking their ranch land. The Kimball family are millionaires, and they are cattle barons, and are friends with the Bush family. Okay, alright. We were supposed to actually get to Jeff Gannon and the Bush connections, but we're going to have to get that in the next episode, because we got to wrap up here. But this is some mind-shocking stuff here. I've seen on a few other websites that people think this castle is used for some kind of satanic rituals on the summer and winter equinox, June 21st, December 21st. I wouldn't doubt it. Also, I've seen Noreen's PI, Dennis Whalen, talk about the same county in Colorado and how the local sheriff doesn't prosecute cult members. It was posted on the Democratic Underground website, but I can't find it. There is an Elephant Rock and an Elephant Rock Road near Sedalia. County Road NCO 67 is also named Elephant Rock Road. If you look up Elephant Rock, Sedalia, Colorado on Google Maps, it will take you to the area. If you look at the terrain style map, the road seems to just end after it curves past Elephant Rock. Also very interesting to me is that the satellite imagery on either side of Elephant Rock has less quality. Intentionally? Is this intentionally degraded so people can't see anything? Another post here. Google Maps description calls it San Isabel National Forest. That right there should throw up a red flag. National Forest means that the federal government has some sort of vested interest in the area. Anywho, Buena Vista is a rinky-dink nowhere place on the advertiser censored cheek of backwoods Colorado. Is that supposed to be butt cheek or something? There's nothing there. The whole concept of some rancher selling a huge chunk of his property to a developer for a quick buck happened all the time back in the late 80s in Colorado. Believe me, I was stationed there for the first time from 86 to 89. Just doesn't hold water. What the hell would some get-rich-quick developer be thinking by investing in setting up a housing development 40 to 50 miles from the nearest population center? And believe me, if you've never lived in Colorado during the winter, 4 to 50 miles means you're snowed the hell in. Any county south of Denver doesn't get state funding for its infrastructure and never has. Not even El Paso County, which contains Fort Carson and Colorado Springs. They also linked some interesting articles here. Daily Sentinel, Grand Junction, Colorado, June 17, 1982. Princess Anne arrives in Denver for short stay. After a 13-hour flight, Britain's Princess Anne arrived here without fanfare to begin a 4-day Colorado visit. The princess arrived at approximately 8:40 p.m. Wednesday at Denver's Stapleton International Airport and was taken by car to the 23-room home of the Vernon Taylors on their 30-acre estate near Green Gables Country Club. Not stopping to talk to a reporter or to pose for photographers, Princess Anne was presented a bouquet of flowers by one of the group of Denver officials that included Governor Richard Lamb and Mayor William McNichols. Only city and state officials were on hand with members of the press to greet the princess. Her arrival was closed to the public. Area sympathizers for Northern Ireland have said that they would picket the princess at her Denver appearances to protest the military occupation of that country, but they failed to show up at the airport. Princess Anne, scheduled for today, called for an informal news conference at the Brown Palace Hotel here later. There was to be a private reception at the governor's mansion hosted by the British Consul General Richard Talboys, where the princess will meet members of Denver's British business community and organizers of the British Fair. She will be the featured guest at the British Fair Saturday. The event is a cultural and trade exposition at Kent Denver Country Day School and is sponsored by the English-Speaking Union and the Institute of International Education. On Friday, the princess will tour the North American Air Defense Command at Colorado Springs, lunch with the city's leaders at Broadmoor Hotel, and spend the afternoon at INMOS, a British-owned technology corporation. Saturday, she will tour Denver, Children's Hospital, visit the British Fair, and have supper at Cherokee Ranch near Sedalia, home of the fair's co-chairman, Tweet Kimball. Sunday, the princess will attend a service at Denver's St. John's Episcopal Cathedral and spend the rest of the day in private. Princess Anne will leave Denver Monday to begin a 3-day visit in New Mexico, where more receptions, dinners, and other royal events are planned. I mean, is it safe disclosing, like, the princess's every move? I mean, that's kind of weird. They did that right in the newspaper. Interesting. So, is this poster alleging that Tweet Kimball owns all of these properties? This is Daily Sentinel, July 7th, 1990. Sons sue rancher giving away land. A prominent rancher who wants to preserve her 6,000-acre Cherokee Ranch as open space is being challenged in court by her 2 grown sons, who say she showed wanton disregard for their feelings. Richard and Kirk Campbell filed suit in Douglas County District Court to wrest control of the ranch from their mother, Tweet Kimball. They want to stop their mother from trying to preserve the Cherokee Ranch as open space. And how many buildings are on this open space? Daily Sentinel, December 11th, 96. Douglas County Commissioners have agreed to pay $2 million for development rights to an 82-year-old heiress' 5,000-acre ranch. Tweet Kimball, heiress of a Tennessee ranching family, has owned the Cherokee Ranch and its medieval Scottish castle reproduction since 1954. So supposedly, yeah, there's some kind of cult activity at this castle, and who knows how many ranches are on all of this property. Weird stuff. Another post by Johnny Chicago here. Anyone have thoughts on this Colorado region where Bonacci showed the house where Gosch was held captive? This does appear to be not to be the best logical place to make homes, since it is an area that gets snowed in often to the point where travel to nearby towns is difficult. It makes sense if you are someone who wants complete privacy and committing child trafficking. Why have multiple people in the military have connections with this region and keep owning these same properties? Also, again, as I always state, anything with Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino attached to it has to involve evil. Also, obviously, we've talked about Conspiracy of Silence, this documentary that was prevented from airing to keep all this information on the download, but there was actually another one so Conspiracy of Silence was supposed to be aired May 3rd, 1994, but there was an older documentary, Boys for Sale, 1981. Journalist Tom Phillip, professor at the University of Austin, Texas, was involved, and there was an assassination attempt upon him. and his death was ruled a suicide afterwards. Again, a lot of these people commit suicide with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. I mean, it's really weird. I don't know if that's what happened to him. I just, in generalities, a lot of people who get taken out, the autopsy report does not match suicide. And Thomas Lee Philippot, he was the director of Boys for Sale, known as the Campus Crusader. And so, I mean, again, so this is 1981. This is before the Johnny Gosch abduction. And there's already information here on these so-called elite pedophile rings and child trafficking and all of this. So this actually existed and was exposed to a certain extent before Johnny Gosch was even kidnapped. So the coincidence theorists, I mean, they really don't have a leg to stand on here. This is actually really weird. Here's a post on Unresolved Mysteries regarding Tom Philpott. Did he commit suicide? Was he suicided for exposing an elite child trafficking ring? In light of all of this Prince Andrew Jeffrey Epstein stuff, I started thinking of Tom Philpott. He was a much-loved history professor at the University of Texas who was known for his activism against what he saw as the worst treatment of teenage boys who supported them with sex work in the country. We need to go back to 1980 for some perspective. Homicide rates were rising and about to reach their peak. Dean Corll had just been shot by his accomplice after murdering almost 30 teenage boys, and John Wayne Gacy would be nearing the end of his notorious killing spree. Somebody else could probably explain all this better, but the takeaway seems to be that there was a climate of violence and disregard for the welfare of teenage boys. You might be wondering why I'm putting so much emphasis on teenage boys rather than girls. That's because Tom Philpott alleges that at that time in Houston, for every adult female prostitute, there were 9 boys supporting themselves through sex work. He goes on to say they are frequently the target of more sadistic violence. When asked why the boys seem to be more popular, he thinks it's because they're more exotic and more forbidden. There is a great public access documentary on YouTube called Boys for Sale that goes into the subject more. Warning, it goes into graphic detail about the sexual abuse of teenagers. I really wish I could read the Texas Monthly article I cited, but for some reason my phone won't let me. I can't find a whole lot of information about the circumstances surrounding Tom Philpott's death, except that he was found dead at his home in 1991 with a gunshot wound to the head. It was declared a suicide pretty quickly, but there are many people that wonder if he was in fact murdered for exposing the systemic abuse of teenage boys. It's important to note that an attempt was made on his life just a couple years prior when 2 men broke into his home to rob it and shot at his head. Thankfully, he was unharmed, and apparently the whole thing was written off as a home invasion gone wrong. What a coincidence. Whether he killed himself or not, I truly consider him a hero way ahead of his time, a great example of a living lawful good. And in light of all this Epstein stuff, I think he deserves more attention. Yeah, in the post-Epstein era, again, like all of these authority-worshipping cultists and coincidence theorists desperately trying to soothe their dissonance that anything like this could happen in the world. I mean, again, they really don't have a leg to stand on. All of this is getting exposed more and more. So was this some kind of a connection in Houston mentioned specifically in the Johnny Gosch case about these like child auctions? Because this guy is exposing all this stuff in Houston. Interesting post here back at the Web Sleuths forum. Your post really alludes to the fact that the rich, powerful, and influential within government can make anything go away if it threatens their political career and that of their cohorts, notably before it becomes public. Another great follow-up post by Johnny Chicago here. Indeed, our intelligence community /CIA has a long history of making things go away or using the term conspiracy theorist directed at people to discredit them as crazy. The inception of the CIA was in 1947, and this psych dispatch went out around April 67. It is from that point on that the term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist has been shoved down the public's throats. It was weaponized just as so many other labels have been used to distract, manipulate, and changed the narrative to suit their agenda. Conspiracy is a term created by the CIA in 1967 and very likely responsible for the widespread introduction of conspiracy theory as a term of political abuse, having orchestrated that development as a deliberate means of influencing public opinion. This is a quote from Professor Lance DeHavensmith. A perfect example is how the mainstream media keeps the public believe Oswald was the lone gunman in the JFK assassination, when in fact he was a patsy. And again, if you haven't checked out the Mindshock episode on JFK, make sure you check that out. We go deep. If all you watch is mainstream programs with Peter Jennings keeping the same narrative going, then an individual will never know the full details of the case. People who are truly interested in cases will look at every source possible. Here I go off on a tangent. In addition, my favorite statistic about the JFK assassination related stats is that if you calculate the probability that many witnesses connected to the JFK assassination would die, many of the deaths seem a tad suspicious. Karate chop to the neck, heart attacks and cancer in young people, suicides. The odds of that many listed people connected to the Kennedy assassination would die of any cause within 3 years after the event is 1 in 167 trillion. The probability is 1.4 to the negative 33rd, or 1 in over 714 trillion. That number is greater than all the stars in the universe and all the grains of sand on Earth. There are an estimated 300 billion trillion stars in the universe, 3 followed by 23 zeros. There are an estimated 700,000 trillion grains of sand on Earth. Mathematically proven, all these deaths cannot be a coincidence. Unless you're a hardcore coincidence theorist. Also, this kind of reminds me of all the astronauts and people that work for NASA that just keep dying in disproportionate numbers to any other organization. I mean, it's crazy stuff. But another point, so in recent times, though, like, what's the scoreboard in the past couple of years alone on critical thinking conspiracy theorists versus authority worshipping cultists who are coincidence theorists? I mean, it's not even close. I mean, have the coincidence theorists been right about anything the past couple of years? I mean, the more things that are exposed, I mean, just corruption awareness, aka conspiracy theorism, I guess if you would call it that. I mean, it's simply aware of all these corrupt people engaged in crime. I mean, it's not rocket science. I'm going to go over one more thing in this coincidence stack, quite mind-shocking. So, Corinne Elaine Perry was murdered in Des Moines around this time period here. Des Moines Register, September 2nd, 1984. Odyssey of Hope and Despair by Larry Fruling and Bob Shaw. Several days after 14-year-old Eugene Martin disappeared, Donald and Sue Martin, Eugene's father and stepmother, found themselves in a yellow and black sedan riding with a stranger down the narrow road through a rural Polk County graveyard. The Martins were with a middle-aged husky man who identified himself only as Bernie. He had come to the door saying his psychic powers would lead the Martins to the graves of Eugene, Johnny Gosch, and 3 other young men. Bernie drove southeastward from the Martins' home at a maddeningly slow speed. Occasionally, he pulled off the street and rubbed his eyes as though in deep concentration. And if this is all an act, like, would he, I mean, was this, who, I mean, would a psychic make this act where they drive super slow, every 10 minutes they stop and rub their eyes? I mean, maybe, I don't know, but just continuing on here. The Martins became increasingly edgy as Bernie seemed to put himself in the place of Eugene, and then as Eugene lapsed into unconsciousness in the place of the boy's abductor. A week earlier, the Martins could in no way have imagined such a bizarre ride. Married only 4 months, they and the children that each brought to the newly formed household were busy adjusting to one another. Their main worry was that Donald was out of work and money was scarce. Now, Eugene had vanished from a street corner on Des Moines' south side in a haunting rerun of the disappearance of Johnny Gosch from a West Des Moines street corner nearly 2 years earlier. And the Martins' lives were cast upon an odyssey of grief, horror, faint hopes, and crushing despair in an all-too-familiar journey for 2 other Iowa families. Those of the Gosch boy and of Corinne Perry of Creston. Now, I'm not sure if the Corinne Perry case is connected here, but just a quick write-up here on Web Sleuths, February 15th, 2020. We have to keep in mind the date of the article we're reading before. So, Corinne Elaine Perry, 17 years old, April 17th, 83, case summary by Jody Ewing. Corinne Perry, 17, had everything going for her. The Creston High School senior had just earned a scholarship to college and planned to double major in psychology and acting. She belonged to the school's mime troupe, acted in several school plays, and also participated in speech contests. She was last seen Sunday, April 17th, 1983, at a coin-operated laundromat in Creston, Iowa. According to authorities, a man walked out of the laundromat right behind the teen sometime between 8:30 and 9 p.m. the night she disappeared. The following day, her car, with her clothes neatly folded and lying on the seat, was found parked at the laundromat. Her purse turned up on a highway bridge 7 miles away between Kent and Lenox, Iowa. Officials described the missing teen as 5'7", white female, strawberry blonde hair, gray eyes, a fair complexion, and weighing 110 pounds. On Tuesday, November 27th, 1984, nearly 2 years after Corinne went missing, her remains were discovered near a creek bed in a shallow grave south of Creston between Kent and Lenox, fairly close to the bridge where her purse had been found. Due to the length of time she'd gone missing, the coroner could not establish how she died. I mean, another sad and tragic case from the general area, and also quite shocking, they didn't find her remains, even though the purse was found the following day. What a sad case, and apparently no leads or nothing. I mean, yeah, this is sad indeed. Not a lot of coverage. What a tragic case. This is Creston, Iowa. So at the time of this article, Odyssey of Hope and Despair, this is September. So 2 months, little over 2 months before her remains would have been found. So at the time, she was missing at the time of this article that we're going through right now. So the Martins' lives were cast upon an odyssey of grief, horror, faint hopes, and crushing despair, an all too familiar journey for two other Iowa families, those of the Gosch boy and of Corinne Perry of Creston. Within hours of Eugene's disappearance, the Martins were under the magnifying lenses of detectives and reporters. Within days, they had learned of the slimy underworld of child trafficking and prostitution. Within 2 weeks, they had seen the story of Eugene's disappearance fade away under the dead weight of no new leads, no new information. Donald and Sue Martin and Eugene's mother, Janice Martin, were the people most directly affected by Eugene's disappearance on August 12th as he prepared to deliver the Des Moines Register, Sunday Register, to its 58 customers in middle-class South Side neighborhood. But hundreds of other lives were touched, too. An army of volunteers plastered the nation with missing person posters, searched woods and cornfields, and did whatever else they could to solve the mystery of Eugene Martin's disappearance. Attention was focused anew on the Gosch and Perry families and wounds that never closed. Parents found fresh concerns for their own children. This story is about people cast into unfamiliar roles by the disappearances of 3 young people. Continued from page 1 is about fear, hope, anger, most of all the unbearable suspense of 3 mysteries that have just eluded a conclusion, one for 2 years, one for 17 months, and one for 3 agonizing weeks. Almost 4 hours went by before Bernie the Psychic had made his way with Don and Sue Martin to Avon Cemetery, southeast of the Des Moines city limits, a trip of no more than 6 miles from the Martins' house. Inside the cemetery, Bernie said it had grown too dark to find the graves. By then, the Martins were frightened and only too happy to call off the whole thing. Not too many people scare me, but he had my skin crawling, Donald Martin said later. The Martins, a friend and a policeman, went back the next day to search the cemetery. They found nothing, and they heard no more from Bernie. December 18th to 21st, 1983. God, how appalling to have to sell a piece of chocolate to find our boy. Christy and Tammy are working Locust Street Mall selling candy. A lady walks up to Christy, spits on her, and says, "I wouldn't help your mother find that kid if it was the last thing I ever did. Our daughter fell completely apart. This will be the last time any of our children would participate in any fundraiser." What? A random lady walked up. What? I mean, spitting on somebody's is basically assault. I mean, you're putting your DNA on somebody without their consent. I would say retaliation would have been warranted there. Some people just need to get taught a lesson, especially, I mean, what the heck? I mean, these are grieving family. Noreen Gosch, whose son Johnny vanished September 5th, 1982, while on his Des Moines Sunday Register route in West Des Moines, wrote those words in her diary. Janice Martin sits in her darkened apartment by a telephone, brown vial of tranquilizers by her elbow and a cup of coffee in her hand. I drink 3 or 4 pots a day, she said in a thin, brittle voice. It doesn't bother me because I take my pills. Since her son Eugene vanished 3 weeks ago, her life has been reduced to waiting by the phone and occasionally searching fields and ditches with teams of volunteers. They let me go sometimes, but I was told that I shouldn't really come along because if I was with them and they found something, first you get scared, then hurt, then angry, then you blow a fuse, then you start all over again, she says. My mind isn't there. I'm in and out. Until Eugene vanished, she worked part-time supporting 3 children. I'm a bartender. A lot of people say, yep, see, when they hear that. She says, describing the telephoned accusations that she had failed as a mother. It isn't true, but it still hurts. I've had 6 or 7 calls saying things like, if Gene had been home where he belongs, he'd be here today. I don't know how many strange people there were. Martin recalls the Sunday Eugene disappeared. For her, the night before had been a late one at the Sunrise Tap, a fixture at East 42nd Street and Eastern Boulevard for as long as anyone can remember. She'd had to close the bar and did not get to sleep until 3 a.m. 4 hours later, the phone jangled her awake. It was her sister-in-law, Linda Martin, telling her Eugene had vanished while on his paper route. He had been staying at the South Side home of his father, Don Martin, whom Martin had divorced 2 years before. It took a couple of seconds for it to connect, Martin said. I knew he didn't run away. I talked to him that Tuesday. His birthday was coming up, and he told me he wanted a ghetto blaster like his brothers. As the investigation ground into its 3rd week, Martin says, everyone has their theories, but no cold hard facts. I guess you could say there is no trace. I wonder where he is at and what he is doing, whether he is asking for me and his dad. 2 of Martin's uncles from Saylorville, Roger Blanchard and Bob Walker, dropped by to check on Martin. They have been searching for Gene, sweating through weeds for hours, and they are bushed. Walker, a likable galump of a man, plops onto a sofa. Yep, every year the kooks come out of the woodwork, and them paperboys are easy targets that early in the morning. At the Sunrise Tap, a Tupperware box full of collected money sits on the bar. A note taped to it reads, Janice, you have our prayers, also our love, and most of all, our support. Your friends at Sunrise. Everyone there is fiercely protective of Martin. Between serving Budweiser's owner Darlene McElwee shook her head. It's awful hard to lose a child, but to lose one with no finality to it is something else. People go down the street looking both ways now. Johnny Gosch upset them. This one made them aware. To a reporter, one bar patron says, hey, don't write anything to hurt her, okay? More than 400 people sit in the spacious sanctuary of the First Assembly of God Church on Merle Hay Road in Des Moines for a terror-filled 2-hour, 20-minute program on sexual abuse and the murder of children. One speaker, Bob Curry, had 3 children who were among many students allegedly molested by the owners and staff of the Virginia McMartin preschool in Manhattan Beach, California. Los Angeles suburb. Curry tells of watching a videotape in which a psychologist interviews Curry's son, now 5 years old, about the boy's experiences at the school. And there's a lot of coincidence theorists that just deny all of that. It's really weird. Eugene Martin leads have dwindled. Johnny Gosch, nothing but dead ends. Corinne Perry disappeared in Creston. The end of the interview, the child vents his rage by thrashing the puppets the psychologist has used as go-betweens for the questions and answers. It looked like an Alfred Hitchcock movie, one in which his own son was the featured actor, Curry tells the crowd. A film made by the Minnesota-based Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children opens with a news conference called by 2 officials of the North American Man-Boy Love Association. One of the lisping officials is saying that young boys and girls should be allowed to engage in sex acts without their parents' consent. In it, he says it's a matter of civil rights. He refuses to say how young is too young. The film ends with the heartbreaking funeral of Adam Walsh. Adam was 6 years old when he was abducted from a Fort Lauderdale, Florida shopping center in 1981. His head was found later in a canal. Many people are weeping when the movie ends. When the lights go on again, there's an appeal for money to help find Johnny Gosch and Eugene Martin, and about $1,000 is dropped in the blue bags the ushers have circulated throughout the pews. The crowd's most enthusiastic applause is delivered for Noreen Gosch when she suggested reinstating the death penalty in Iowa for certain sexual offenses against children. These pedophiles, their desires never die, she says. The implication is clear. Even if their desires will not die, pedophile adults with a sexual attraction for children will. After the meeting, Denise Liaz, 33 of Clive, explains why she came. I have a 12-year-old son. The bottom line with me is I'm scared. It's as simple as that. At the regular Corinne Perry support group meeting in Creston, the mood is brisk and businesslike. Since April 17, 1983, when Corinne Perry, 17, vanished after washing her clothes at the Highlander laundromat, the group has brainstormed. The street corners where Eugene Martin, I'm assuming some of this text is out of order, twice monthly in the basement of the First Congressional United Church of Christ about brainstorm, twice monthly in the basement of the First Congressional United Church of Christ about how to find her. Where are we on the flyers? Did we decide not to do the airports? Asked the Reverend Lyle Kuel, the church pastor. He looks at the 13 people huddled around the folding table, then at Corinne's mother, Barbara. Well, how many do we send to each airport, he asked. To Joplin, we send 10. How many to Kansas City, Denver? Don Perry, Corinne's father, scans the table, cluttered with posters and pamphlets about Corinne and with magazines about missing children. The Reverend Dolores Donch of nearby Cromwell gets an idea. She has recently married a couple in New York City, and the groom is a mechanic for a bus company. Would it be advantageous to see if he knows about the ad rates for the posters in those buses? She asks. Everyone nods. Corinne Perry and the two paperboys are the only victims of possible abductions in the state who are not accounted for, officials say. And as in many other cases, friends and strangers have instinctively gathered around the grieving parents. I'd lose my mind without these people, Corinne's mother says. Support groups bake hot dishes, they lick stamps and call congressmen. They plaster posters in truck stops on their vacations, they cry with the families. But above all, support groups keep hope alive. Corinne's sister, Letitia, 21, keeps a plain spiral ring notebook to record every personal event that would be of interest to Corinne. The most recent entry is Lloyd and Laura moved to Council Bluffs, Letitia says. I put in births, deaths, divorces, anything she will need to know when she gets back. Dennis Gregory Whelan, private detective with offices on the ground floor of an apartment building on the west side of Omaha, worked on the Johnny Gosch case about 8 months before giving it up in exhaustion and frustration. Although he is no longer employed, Stanley Johnson helped search. A color photo of Johnny is prominent on his office wall, along with smaller black and white pictures of about 40 other children from whom Whelan has searched. Some were returned to the parents dead, some alive. In Whelan's front office is a large U.S. map on which are pinned 62 small red flags, one for each reported sighting of Johnny. The markers span the map from Fargo, North Dakota to McAllen, Texas, and from San Francisco, California to Taunton, Massachusetts. Whelan is one of many investigators, private official, who have been frustrated in their search for Johnny Gosch. They are well aware that they have so far failed in what they are paid to do. I think everyone would take it personally to a degree, says Lieutenant Lyle McKinney of the West Des Moines Police Department, whose full-time assignment for nearly 2 years has been to find Johnny Gosch. McKinney started on the case September 27, 1982, when he returned from a police training school in Virginia. You're given a job to do, and you take pride in doing the job as well as you can and reaching some type of successful conclusion, says McKinney. The Gosch case occupies 4 drawers in McKinney's filing cabinets. His carefully lettered notes fill a handful of battered, much-used notebooks. Thousands of tips and leads have come to nothing. I don't know where Johnny Gosch is, McKinney says. I don't have any idea. The Gosch case still brings 5, 6, 7 calls a week from people wanting to or offering information, McKinney says. One of the things that keeps me interested is that I have a boy that age who had a paper route at the time and was delivering papers on Ashworth Road that morning, says McKinney, who, unlike many other law officers, has retained the Gosch's respect. Detective Whelan, who looks like he has been down a lot of leads in his 49 years, tells of many twists and turns in the Gosch investigation, all leading to dead ends. Nothing came of Whelan's reporting of a young man, a homosexual from Omaha, to infiltrate Des Moines' homosexual community in hopes of a lead to Johnny's disappearance. Nothing came of Whelan's trip to New England to look through thousands of child exploitation pictures seized in a raid. Nothing came of the investigation of a Texas trucker who claimed to have picked up Johnny in West Des Moines and driven him as far as the Atlantic. If he is alive, he's not in the U.S., Whelan says. Well, how would he know that? And now, with the second one, the disappearance of Eugene Martin, I'm not even sure he's alive. Eugene Martin has been missing without a trace for 6 days. When Stanley C. Johnson, 63-year-old retired insurance salesman, drives up to a large cornfield south of Ankeny to help find him. Johnson and about 35 others who answered the Des Moines Police Department plea for volunteers fight their way through the dirty, dense rows of 7-foot-tall corn for several hours in the suffocating humidity, sharp corn leaves slapping their faces. Their instructions were delivered at 8:30 a.m. by a bleary-eyed policeman, Richard Davis, who had been among the officers who went through part of the field from midnight until 3:30 the same morning, reportedly on the advice of a psychic. Davis tells the volunteers they are looking for a shirt, blue jeans, and size 8 tennis shoes the Martin boy was wearing when he disappeared, or for Martin's body. If you find anything, don't touch it, Davis instructs. Just stop and call for an officer. We don't want any evidence disturbed. Stanley C. Johnson fumbled for words to explain why he had joined the search. For one thing, he regretted not having helped look for Johnny Gosch. The fact that this has happened again makes you even more concerned, he says. He adds, we've been praying for them, but sometimes praying is not enough. We are God's hands and voice and feet. We need to pitch in sometimes. I'm not very good at expressing myself when it comes to something like this, but that's the way I feel. The search is fruitless. 250 miles away, Corbin Jacobs, chief of the 16-member Palmyra Volunteer Fire Department, requests missing posters of the Martin and Gosch boys. Jacobs, 62, and the other boys on the fire department soon have plastered western Illinois and eastern Missouri with pictures of Martin and Gosch. A few weeks before Eugene Martin disappeared, a Burlington Northern freight train went by Jacobs' house in Palmyra, a town of 3,644 residents. He had seen a young boy riding on a rail car with a dog. He called the Burlington Northern dispatcher about the boy and was told a railroad detective would get in touch right away. Nobody called me back about that lad, Jacob says. That's one of the things that touched me off about those Des Moines boys. Nobody seemed to care. The boy on the train had to belong to somebody, too. He had to be a good kid. He had his dog with him. The 300 posters distributed by Jacobs and his volunteer firemen are among 148,000 that the Des Moines Register and the Tribune Company ordered to fill requests. Thousands of additional posters were provided by other printers. Noreen Gosch trembled as she inched her car down Forest Avenue past 13th Street, peering through the dark for the fire hydrant where she was supposed to drop $120,000 in ransom. Besides her, in a paper bag, was a ransom of 2 pieces of wood. Crouched behind her in the back seat was her private detective, gun drawn. She thought of what it would be like to get the severed hand of her son in the mail. Hours before, a deep voice on the telephone had threatened to arrange just that. Man, what this woman has gone through, I mean, this is just crazy. She pulled over, stepped in front of the headlights, and threw the bag down. Several hours later, police officers returned to the bag to the Gosches. No one had picked it up, and there was still no Johnny. What? So somebody pranked her, said that they were going to send her son's severed hand in the mail to her if she didn't deliver $120,000, and they didn't even bother to check if she delivered it. I mean, these are some sick people. No one picked it up. There was still no Johnny. I never was so scared in all my life, she said later, describing the false alarm that happened October 13th, 1982. She has since endured worse. Like an angry mother, grisly Noreen Gosch has snarled and snapped and fought. She and her husband John have prodded, begged, offended, hustled, stepped on toes, and frazzled nerves. They have endured insults, accusations, and a procession of swooning psychics. They have been dogged and even outrageous. But no one can talk to the couple very long without realizing they would run naked down the McVicar freeway if it would help them find Johnny. We still walk by his bedroom every day, said the mother. Noreen Gosch is a phenomenon. Des Moines parents who have never met her refer to Noreen in conversations. She and John have appeared on the Today Show, changed Iowa's kidnapping laws, and supervised distribution of tens of thousands of Find Johnny Gosch posters. Noreen should run for president, declared one woman in her neighborhood. She gets things done. After the September 5th, 1982 disappearance, Noreen Gosch got some advice. She said, a very wise man told me, whatever you do, keep yourself under control, make a plea for your son's life, but don't break down, because if you do, They'll use your story maybe once or twice and then it's done. You are in for a long search, and it's going to be up to you to keep the story going. That she has done, and parents whose children have vanished since, Johnny acknowledged a debt to her. There wouldn't be such a big deal about Eugene Martin if Noreen hadn't made such a stink, said a mother in a supermarket checkout line. By maximizing exposure to the public, the Gosches have opened themselves to attack. Noreen said that one of her presentations, the publisher of a small newspaper said, "I don't think you ever had a son named Johnny. I think you are doing this for the money, the power, and the glory. I told him I hope they get your kid next." Wow. Damn. I don't have to take that. I am arrogant now. Dallas Davis, neighbor and close friend, snapped, "Most of the comments I have heard from what I would call extremely ignorant people are things like Noreen appeared in full makeup or Noreen appeared on TV with her fingernails painted." So, interesting snapshot into the area and the sentiment at the time. And we also went over a bunch of these scumbags getting arrested. I mean, there's clearly rings. There were all these rings operating all over the U.S., involved with politicians, corrupt police, etc. So, yeah, very, very unfortunate and tragic for all of these missing and trafficked children. And yeah, I mean, coincidence theorists are not doing a favor to these kids and their families by denying the existence of these rings. It's just, I mean, it's rough. It's really rough. All of these people deserve justice and closure. And yeah, awareness needs to be kept up. And in the post-Epstein era, it is getting a little bit easier. The coincidence theorists and the authority worshipping cultists have been just proven wrong time and time again, that now it's a little bit easier to discuss these things without these goofs coming out of the woodwork denying the possibility that criminals can work together. So we have plenty more to cover. We will be getting to Jeff Gannon in the next episode. So this was just going deep down the rabbit hole. Hope you guys found another edition of Mindshock True Crime interesting and informative in the Johnny Gosch case. You can help support Mindshock, donate to our PayPal, become a YouTube member right here on YouTube, like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunks of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off.